Recording in progress.
All right, so I'll call the Permanent Building Committee meeting to order. We have a couple people remote. I'm gonna take a roll call attendance. Greg Stepler,
Here.
John Coot, I don't believe is here. Kirk McCormick.
Here.
Nancy Toomey, Nancy online yet? No. Mike Nazaro.
Here.
Nancy Zimlak.
Here.
Mark Doxer.
Here.
And Pat Tompkins here. We have a quorum for both the Permanent Building Committee and the Center for Active Living Building Committee. Sorry,
Hey, I'm here.
sorry. Thank you. So first order of business, if there's any public comment.
Oh, and Nancy's here now. Jeremy.
Nancy's here and John was just trying to call me. He was trying to FaceTime me, which isn't gonna happen. So does anyone have their hands up online? No public comment? Okay, so we can move on to the introduction of Turner and Townsend Harry. We'll refer to them as either TTH or just Harry, which might be a little easier. We have Brian Romadka and Chuck Adam with us, who've come on board. So I'll turn it over to both of you if you want to do just a quick introduction, and then maybe we can go around the room and everyone can introduce themselves so you guys get a feel for who everybody is.
I'll start. Thank you for having us. We're pleased to be here. I feel like it's been doing this for a long time. I was telling everybody, we chased it when you were chasing the Walgreens, so we go way back then. But we're thrilled to be here. We've met with a number of you already in this room and other places. We went to the Finance Forum Committee meeting, whatever it was the other night, which was very good. We appreciate that. So we're just thrilled to be here. I'm sort of the big picture guy. I'm sort of in the background. Brian's your day-to-day project manager. He'll do all the work and I'll just sit back and watch. I'll be engaged. Take credit when I can, but Brian's your day-to-day and he's got a good handle on what's been happening so far,
So hello, everyone. Yep, I'm Brian. Some of you I've met, others I haven't. So I'm pleased to meet all of you. I'm a senior project manager with Turner and Townsend Harry. I've been working on large capital projects for about 25 years. Been involved in early planning stages all the way through. And I'm happy to be here as your OPM to build off the large amount of work that's been done to date and to be able to see this project forward and kind of help move it across the finish line.
Thank you. If we could just go around the room and give Chuck and Brian a quick introduction. Maybe we'll start with Greg and Nancy online. Greg, if you want to just introduce yourself and Nancy.
Sure. Greg Stepler, member of the Permanent Building Committee, one of the founding members. I think Pat and I are in year 9 or 10 or 12 or something. So been around for a while, 20 plus years in the commercial construction business.
Hi, I'm Nancy Toomey. I know I've met you guys at the interview time. I'm an architect, mostly doing residential work, also on the Permanent Building Committee member and been on it for quite some time. Looking forward to this project.
And just working around the table, we're starting with Mark. We'll go around clockwise and then we'll get the back row.
Mark Doxer. I am the designee of the select board in town and a member here on the Permanent Building Committee for the Recal Center. Also was part of what was called Recalc, which is referred to in your very nice document here, which was kind of what the select board had set up to get this process moving, to better understand the needs, to take it forward and bring this to the community.
Nancy Zimlak, I'm Chair of the Council on Aging. We've been working with Recalc for the past 2 years on this project and offering our opinions, sometimes wanted, sometimes not. But we're delighted that we are as far as we are on this project, so welcome aboard.
I'm Jenna Wood. I'm the Community Services Director. I oversee recreation, elder and human services and veterans. And just like Nancy, I've been on the project with Recalc and Council on Aging for the past 2 years, along with Chris in the corner over there, Chris Kowaleski. He's our Elder and Human Services Administrator, so he's been very involved as well. So looking forward to getting this going.
I'm Joe Huggins. I'm the Director of Facilities for the town of Reading.
Kevin Kabuzzi, Assistant Facilities Director, Town of Reading.
Pat Tompkins, I'm the chair of the Permanent Building Committee. As Greg mentioned, it was nine years ago, Greg. Founding members of the Permanent Building Committee. And we can start maybe with Matt. We'll go around back row.
I'm Reading Town Manager. Good to see you both again and excited to continue to work on this project. I've been working on it for about 2 years with the group, so.
I'm Jane Wellman. I'm the Assistant Town Manager and I manage the Administrative Services Department, Public Services and Community Services. Excited to have the Heary, working with Heary folks again. I've worked with one of your colleagues for years, so it's great news.
Marilyn Shapley, I'm a member of the Council on Aging, was previously the chair of the Council on Aging and deeply involved hand in hand with Nancy on this project throughout with everything. And again, as Nancy said, sometimes one and sometimes not. Very
Why do they keep looking at me?
Great.
Joel Barkman, an architect, one of the architects for the project, worked on the feasibility study and looking forward to getting our team going on the schematic design here.
So I'm Mike Nazaro, been doing construction for over 20 years. And I'm actually fairly new to the PBC, so getting up to speed on a lot of things.
Hi, I'm Kirk McCormick on the Permanent Building Committee. I'm an attorney and I've been specializing in construction law basically my entire career.
Great.
I'm Art Greenberg. I'm an associate member, relatively new also to the PBC. I'm a mechanical engineer by background, and you'll see from my comments that I'm quite interested in energy and my focus.
Hi, I'm Chris Kowalski, the Elder and Human Services Administrator.
I'm Carolyn Nazaro. I'm here as the designee for the school committee. I'm also the chair for the school building project.
Thank you. So first of all, it will not be a test. And obviously, there's a lot of people in the room, a lot of different interested parties. Don't be afraid to ask, what's that person's role? Hey, Pat, Mark, whoever, who was that person? Just ask. There's obviously a lot of different people. So I know you've been, you guys have come up to speed pretty quick. I've seen some of the information you put together for the meeting packet. You want to just jump right into your review of the site selection and where we're at now? I think that'd be great.
Question, who's Jupiter Holmes?
I don't know who.
Oh, newspaper editor.
Okay.
I always like to know when they're
Reading Daily Times Chronicle.
Just to have it.
Okay, so thank you, everyone. I'll try to be brief. There's a lot of information in the packet, so I'm not going to spend time going through all of it. But as you know, we were brought on last month. We've been kind of getting our feet wet. We had the opportunity to meet with a lot of different groups to get more of the background and also review almost a decade worth of work that's been done. It's been really impressive how far along this has come and how the town is really working to meet these identified needs of the seniors. We put together a report that is pretty comprehensive based on the work that was done. And I won't go through all the detail. I hope that all of you had a chance to read through that. But basically, what we found is that the steps that were taken really set up a good program for the project, a solid understanding of what the needs are. There was extensive outreach within the community. And all of that was well documented on through the feasibility study that eventually led to 3 sites being identified and studied. We looked at the materials that were presented and the questions that were asked about each of those sites and felt that they really represented the right type of information that was needed in order to be able to make a determination on those sites and move forward. So we can dig into that a little more and answer questions if anybody has them, but our report, as well as BH+A's report, the feasibility study was in the packet. And I think the feasibility study had been maybe presented to this committee at some point in the past. So that's kind of where we are right now. We did get an update last week on environmental tests for the site. So those came back favorable. That was quite a relief. I think we all weren't sure exactly what they would find on the site. So I guess the thing I'd like to do is to see if there are questions about the feasibility study, about our review, about any of the test results that came back. I want to make sure that everyone here on this committee feels like they really understand the material that's in those documents and have their questions answered.
Yeah, our goal, as we've discussed at the very beginning, as Brian said, is to give you all the same information with our take on it. I think we accomplished that. We hope you think the same. And to do a scoring of valuation very similar to what ReCap did. We thought that the way that handled was tremendous. We would have done it the same way. So congrats to Joel's team. We think it was great. And that's up on the screen to look at it. And we just think it's the better way to go through it, all the same information. But again, we wanted to hear from the PBC if you had any thoughts on if you wanted to weight the questions a little different, or did you feel good about them the way they are? And if not, then we would suggest it's ready to, unless there are any questions that Brian said, to get into depth into the report to discuss and how you might have accomplished it doing that. So we can help you move forward to the next step. That was really where our headspace is to look at, say, how do we get you to get to this point, like recount it.
Right. So a lot of work's been done, and we want to make sure that everyone's up to speed. So are there any questions that anyone has, I guess, at this point? Of course, we can always talk about more stuff later if it comes up, but any questions relative to any of the work that's been done in the past on the feasibility study, on our report that was in your packet, or anything pertaining to that, or relative to the test results for the environmental testing on Simmons Way that were done? Okay.
Did anyone have any questions on the scoring matrix, if you will, the scoring, the topics covered or anything like that?
Nancy has her
Hey,
hand up.
Pat. Hi, thanks. I guess my only, visible, thinking about this is what I didn't see, and I don't know if there's a way to do this, but I didn't see anything relative to, the public's perception of a senior center far away from the center of town. I know that there was some discussion in all that literature, but I know their site is close proximity to one other program or whatever it might be. Your uses in here kind of cover it, but I didn't see that being weighted as much as sort of the overall aspects of the site itself. And let me just back up and say, one of my worries is that when this goes out to the town for a vote in terms of funding it, is everyone going to think that this is a good place for it? And it obviously from a functional standpoint, it looks like Simon's Way is the best place. It gives you the most options. But and this is more of an ethereal way of thinking about it, how do we weight that? You know, there's a lot of mosquitoes over there. It's pretty far from the center of town. Is that going to come into play versus across the street from the high school? That's really where I'm coming from. I don't see how that gets weighted in here.
So that did come up in the survey that was done in the previous work. There was a feedback about the location of the site and how people felt about where it would be located. I'm trying to see what page that was on in the packet. But the result, here it is. It's on page 14 of our report. So what we found in looking over the past data is that the majority of the people didn't really seem to have much of a preference on where it was located in town. Could you bring that up, Jenna, to show that on the screen?
Let me pull that up in my files here.
But it is an important consideration. And one of the things that we liked about the site selection tool was that there were formulated questions where people could put in their score for each of those. But at the end, there was also a place to add up to 20 points that could be defined by the individual user. So that's on the third section. So that helps to bring in really any other possible considerations that anyone on the committee, you know, it feels are important and can help weight them. And those can then be discussed when we reconvene after we have those results. Were you able to find that on page 14?
Yeah, just pulling it up right now, so sorry.
So while Jenna's pulling that up, I don't know if anyone had a chance to work with the tool, but I hope that it's easy to follow. I thought the way it was laid out was quite good. So step one, there's a set of instructions about what you need to do. Step two is basically, and we can look at this in more detail when she pulls up the file, is to go to the sheet that has all the site criteria with specific numbers listed that you can choose for individual rankings, and there's an explanation for each of those numbers. So you would do one for each of the sites.
Oops.
And then the third part is you'll see how your rankings come together on the third page. Yeah, maybe we'll jump back to this one.
One more down. Sorry.
Yeah, there you go at the bottom. Could you zoom in on that a little bit?
Sure.
On figure 7. Yep. Yeah, so this is one of the things that we were looking at when we looked at the past work that had been done and what the survey results were showing. So we have 43% saying that they have no location preference. The light blue, the 10% located outside of the downtown was fine. And then 15%, I guess that was kind of a gray area where they didn't really specify one way or the other. But 32% of the survey respondents indicated that they would have a preference for a downtown area.
Yeah, and I guess I saw that as being a pretty strong, you know, reason to be thinking about it closer. That doesn't negate obviously everything that we're talking about with Simon's Way, and I'm not opposed to Simon's Way. I just want to make sure that we're going down a path that we're going to find acceptance by the community when we get there for that particular location.
Yeah, Martha.
So this is it's an important discussion. I think that when the question was asked, and certainly I think the way we interpreted it was that downtown, in fact, would be preferred. Problem is that there's no suitable space to do it downtown. So therefore, we had to look at trade-offs. I personally ranked the Oakland Road site is almost as high as Simon's Way or Simmons Way. I'm not sure what it actually is, but whatever it is, SYMONDS. For a lot of reasons. And I viewed being near the schools and the YMCA to be a plus. As it turns out, I heard from a lot of folks that they viewed it as a minus, that was crowding and too much going on in that space. But I think the net is that is not a downtown location. It's another away from downtown. We, I think, tried to look at every downtown location there was, including one just a few weeks ago, to see if that might be another option. And we just can't come up with something that has the necessary size, the necessary structure to be able to do that right now. And as we know, there's no open space per se. So that's kind of where we are. And it just, as Brian was saying, I think in the qualitative ratings at the end, you'll see members of the Council on Aging, members from ReCal all kind of weighed in on that in terms of where that fit. And it's a trade-off. And, you know, I think each of us had our own reasons as to why, you know, we thought one would be better than another. I think your question is, will the community accept it? And I think if we look at the results here from the survey, and again, it's not a scientific sample per se, but a bunch of people responded. There was a desire for a facility that had some breadth to it. It had some facilities to serve both the community as well as clear designated space and programming for seniors, if that's the definition that we use. And that really limited us as to where we could look. So is it perfect? No. Is it very good? I think yes.
And we also, in one of our rating categories was the proximity to abutters, which was really important to the group. The Oakland Road abutters came to the abutters meeting and were very vocal about not wanting anything built on that land. So I think that also had an impact on how the committee saw that as far as the abutters and preferring a location that was less impacted than Oakland Road. And there was some feedback as well about traffic and things like that at Oakland Road as well, and the high school students and the seniors. So there's a lot of different community charrettes too that we went over these locations.
I think from the senior perspective, I agree with both what Jenna and Mark have said. Given our choices, the feedback that we received from the senior population is that the Simon's Way site is probably the more preferred site. There's more space there. There's possibility for outdoor activities there. There's plenty of parking there. So there are, each site has the good and the bad, but Simon's Way kind of rose to the top just for that reason.
Okay.
And you had people who lived on that side of town who thought it was a great location.
Right.
So.
Nancy, I guess at the core, your question about certain other extraneous items or, that kind of comes into play with I'll call it the 20 bonus points that you can give. So if you feel like there's some intangibles that we're not covering here, you have the chance to modify your score. I have some other commentary on that, but I'll circle back on it. John, we're reviewing the site ranking sheet, and I'm sure you've gone through all the information.
I haven't actually, I've been
Okay.
doing things.
So Harry is recommending that we use the same site ranking sheet. And we're just going through some questions. I have some questions. And I thought the best way to do this would be to just run through from 1 to 12. And talk through a few things. And see if there's anything that we think as a permanent building committee that we might be looking at differently or want to change. a few things. I'll try and go quick. The first one, the area of the site. One of the things that jumped out to me is the sort of extra points for quote unquote future expansion. I think the program we're considering is robust, to say the least. We're going from 8,000 to 26,000 square feet plus or minus. Do we really, you know, does the quote unquote future expansion really weigh in as a factor? You know, do we think beyond 30, 50 years, we're actually going to be considering expanding this program? I would think that would make sense to me if we were like leaving out the gym and considering doing it later. But I don't know if anyone had any thoughts on that, if that made sense. Mark?
So I do future expansion, not just as kind of physical plant, but connection to other things that could be there as well. So as an example, there may be the possibility that pickleball can be basically abutting this area. And as I've heard, and I'm sure you all hear too, pickleball is an activity that the 60+ community has been embracing, as has the medical community, but that's a different story.
Yeah.
And so thinking of that, thinking of future expansion that may take place at Simon's Way is also part of that too. So that is the last big quote unquote undeveloped site in this town. And if we do this and pickleball happens, there's still a lot of space there. And connecting various things, I think, is a real advantage to the 60+ community as well as the entire community. So my view on that one was, you know, maybe the word future isn't exactly right, but it's thinking about, hey, what can we do here? Are we constraining ourselves or is there more opportunity?
Okay.
And that, you know, each of the 3 sites, actually, it's pretty distinct in terms of what the possibilities are.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just running through things that jumped out to me, and if anybody, you know, has any feelings that we should modify something, that's fine with me.
If I could also just add, so I know when we were looking at that, we were looking at the wording and seeing how well it applies. And I know the thought crossed my mind, should we change something here or there? But then there was also the thought, well, is it helpful to have the same parameters to be able to compare the results from past participants that rank them and these participants?
Agreed. I understand. The next item, impact to abutters. I think that's pretty straightforward. It's always been, anytime we've talked about sites and projects, always been high on our list. That's fine. The next item, traffic conditions. Trying to understand a little bit, like, what is this? Is this the impact that traffic has on the clients getting to the location? Or is this impact the location has on the adjacent traffic? Like, what are we asking? What's the question we're asking and answering here? I don't know if you followed that, like, or is it both? Is it how the new building impacts the existing traffic, or how the location impacts the people that utilize the facility getting there?
Yeah, so I would say it's not the location, like, is it further for me to travel to get there?
Okay.
But it's the traffic that relates to choosing that location. Are we going to be increasing traffic? So for example, with the Pleasant Street Center location being in the downtown area and adding extensive program to that space, there would be significant traffic flow through that residential neighborhood. So.
Yeah. Okay. All right, that makes sense. That makes sense to everybody?
And was that the understanding in the initial survey as well? Great.
And that was studied by a traffic engineer, or that, like, because there are some mentions of whether that had an impact in the report. Has that been reviewed by someone more competent than, or more experienced maybe than our intuition?
There was a traffic engineer, I think, you know, they're tasked to do a couple of things, figure out how many parking spaces would be needed so that we don't get that underestimated look at the traffic. And then one of the concerns you generally have out of these is turning out of the facility, what's that condition like? So they analyze that, particularly left-hand turns out of the parking lot.
So there's enough information, I think the long and short, there's enough information in the package for us to develop an opinion. There's not full-blown traffic studies that you would have if you had the site selected and you were going forward, which makes sense. considering where we are.
Yep.
Okay. Next items for parking quantity and location of parking. I think that's all pretty straightforward, and it's actually pretty quantitative and objective, and the information is in the documents. Same thing with wetlands and floodplains. I think all that information is in the documents. I went through everything, but it was a while ago. Next, item 7, site construction costs. Do we have all the information on like adjacent site utilities to formulate an opinion on that? Like, is there, can we, with the information we have, do we have where the gas line is? Do they have a gas line, sewer, water, electric, how far away it is, that information?
Yeah, so those were considered in the feasibility study.
Okay.
It is kind of a preliminary review of those things, so there'll be more detail as we move forward. But that was included for each of the sites and was included in the cost estimate.
Okay.
Like this, the high school site doesn't have certain utilities that you have to bring to that open road site. That's discussed. Lineal footage is provided, and then
Okay.
the estimate kicks in.
Okay.
We noticed that in the estimates that they did pick up
Okay.
the liabilities that were needed to feed both all the sites out there.
Okay. Same question on operational costs. Operational costs as they're impacted by insurance, maintenance, landscaping, and garage repairs for the 3 different sites.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have operational cost data. It would be reading through the information about the sites and making sort of a best determination about the magnitude of those impacts. So for example, if you have a parking structure that you have to maintain, you have this whole physical building that needs to be cared for year after year versus a parking lot that's just plowed.
Okay.
All of them will have increased operational costs because you're increasing the programs and you're increasing the square footage.
Yep.
As far as buildings go, the Oakland and the Simon's Way, those were based on the same building, but the building hasn't been fully designed in terms of materials and what's being used. So those were benchmark numbers.
Okay.
I had a comment to that too. Also, one of the things that Recalc discussed, and I think even more broadly, was that it would make sense wherever we go to hire an expert to help us assess operating costs, building and other activities. So regardless of which one is chosen, there's an expectation that that's something that will need to take place in order to bring it forward to town meeting, because I think it's a very reasonable question for the community to be asking. We need to be able to answer it.
Is it reasonable to assume though that operating costs are more heavily impacted by the building itself as opposed to the site? Is there?
Probably building and programming more so than site. However, if you were trying to squeeze things tightly, is probably different from having.
Yeah, that's kind of my thought process, Ari. We're dropping a 26,000 square foot building. Let's just say Simon's Way or Oakland Road. It's kind of like operational costs. I guess those 2 buildings look a little different, so you could make a general, one of them's perfect cube and the other is very long, and we can make a quick assumption that one's going to be more efficient than the other. I saw it as, I just didn't really see it as a move the needle type of item.
Yeah, that's why I'm agreeing. I think that it's hard for the site to have in terms of the weighting factor for this, to make a big difference on the operational cost of the building compared to the design of the actual building.
Right, yeah, that was kind of my note, like, the weighting of that should probably be lower.
I think the idea was you could have 2 sites that are they don't have to be 1, 2, or 3. Simon's and Oakland could be similar on. Idea was to bring to the forefront that if you have a parking garage, you by definition have a much different operational system going on with access control and structural.
Yeah, just maintaining that structure for the life of the building.
Okay. So we might want to recommend a change there. Moving on to number 9, facilities, multi-generational use, site in close proximity to multiple other programs. do we have a defined list of what those quote unquote other programs are?
So each of the sites has different programs that are located, you know, they're adjacent to, and those were in the reports. So I think my understanding is that it wasn't, is this site close to this particular program, A, B, and C for all of them? It's more, what is the site close to, and is that favorable or unfavorable? So with the Pleasant Street Center, it's close to downtown and all that the downtown offers. Oakland being close to the school, and then Simon's Way being close to open space, the ice rink.
Okay. So my question is like, do you consider, and if there's a list of these programs in the documentation, then that's fine, but like, how do I know that for Oakland Road, I gotta say, yeah, I'm close to the high school, that's one program. Most close to the YMCA, that's two programs. Is the high school one program, or is it multiple programs? A lot of different things going on there. Is the skating rink a program that it's close to? What are those programs? Like, is that defined?
Yeah, it was defined in the report, the adjacencies.
Okay. So that's all in there telling us what.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe a different way to ask the question is, it's not just a matter of what it's close to, but how important that is, that it's close to that thing. Right. And whether there's a benefit from the people using one building that might also use the other adjacent thing.
Yeah, and so my understanding is that that was the discretion that the reviewers will be making when they assign a score, whether that's favorable or not. So if it is close to these other programs, does that even matter, or is it very important, or is it a negative thing?
Right.
Okay. We're getting close. Only 3 more to go. Accommodation to other outdoor activities, basically the same question. And this gets back to your point about pickleball. I mean, is this pickleball? Is this question better phrased as, can we fit pickleball here? Yes or no?
The outside trail at Folks One.
And also lawn games were something that came up in the surveys that were desired. And that varied from site to site. So I think those 3 things are the defined programs to date: outdoor walking trails, pickleball, and lawn games.
Okay.
Could I interject just a little bit on this one too? You know, the Oakland site actually is close to recreational activities. It's not on the site, but you've got all the walking trails and all of the high school amenities that are close to that site. So I don't know, by saying it's on the site, that goes back to the, you know, the proximity to other programs, whether that is weighted more importantly. You know, it's a little gray in terms of how these scores get put together, in my mind anyway.
What was the weighting for that other one? I'm trying to see which one. The other programs. Oh, there's
This one right here.
that has one. Okay, so they're both weighted the same, it seems.
Yeah, I think when we were rating it, so one other exterior recreational activity will fit on the site. So like the actual site was more so what we were looking at, like, yeah, it's in close proximity to a walking trail, but a 60+ citizen, are they gonna walk all the way down to the Birch Meadow walking trail? I mean, maybe, but just having everything kind of accessible on the actual site. You can't put a trail or a walking path on Oakland Road. You can't put pickleball next to the Oakland Road site. So I think that was a determining factor when it was being rated as well. Like, what can you do on the actual site?
Yeah, so I think what we're saying is that 9 is looking for the programs near the site. And then 10 is specifically on that piece of land.
Okay. The next one, sustainability impact on design. I'm not sure I understand exactly what this question is asking. Sustainability goals have no impact on the building design. Sustainability goals have some impact on the building design. Or sustainability goals have a major impact on the building's design.
Joel, with that, I looked at this as the sustainability goals as the two sites really, as Simon's Way and the Oakland Road site, with the ability to be able to do what the goals that we understood were set in the plan that were probably easier to accomplish on those two sites than on the other one.
Right, I mean, there's, solar.
Yeah.
There's geothermal considerations, there's the infrastructure for other, energy issues that oddly enough, preserving a building on Pleasant Street is considered a sustainable action, so that was.
Yeah, definitely is. Yeah.
That factor as well, so that, I think some of these were, leave it up to the interpretation of the reviewer, which is the purpose of having multiple reviewers.
Yeah.
Looking at it. It's not trying to direct you into an exact answer, but,
Yeah, I think at this point, and where we are in terms of design, the sustainability features haven't really been fully laid out as to what we're going to do. So it's just more of an understanding is the site going to have a major impact on sustainability decisions that could be made?
Which would really come down to geothermal and canopies for solar?
To me, well, so in line with the utilities, my first question would have been, can RMLD, I'm gonna make a wager that this might be an all-electric building, so a good question we should ask is, can RMLD put enough power to the site? So I don't know if that's a sustainability question or a site, I don't know if that's category 11 or 1. But yeah, otherwise, you brought good points, like geothermal is not the be-all and end-all for a building this size, might not also be the right way to do it. Solar. Yeah, it matters, it was where the roof ends up. I'm not sure, I think in my mind, like the biggest difference in sustainability between the site is preserving a building or building a new one. I have a hard time imagining there's a lot of other factors that are gonna change, but this one's, it's just worded quite tough. Like you get the point that a 10 means good for sustainability, a 1 means bad for sustainability, and I'm gonna rank it in that way. But the way it's phrased is just a little tricky.
yeah, I think you could say, if you look at Oakland, can it be is there any problem on the site that keeps it from being as sustainable of a building as you would like it to be? Look at it the other way around. What are the site constraints that prevent you from getting to a highly sustainable building?
Another item I think that came up with the Pleasant Street is that with the size of the addition in the parking garage, we're eating up any green space that's there. So when you're thinking about rainfall and getting that water back into the ground where it's falling, that is one difference on that site, right? So that makes it harder to do. You can still do it, I guess, but it's somewhat harder to do. Whereas if you have a lot of open green space, you can accommodate that more readily.
Okay. I think I know what we're trying to do there. And then sustainability for a senior center, I think that one's pretty straightforward, unless anyone else had any questions. Kind of feels like it's duplicative of some other stuff, but that's pretty straightforward. I would kind of lean towards certain items like item 10, accommodations for other outdoor activities being weighted higher. That's a 1. 8 and 11 are items I would weight a little bit lower. Big picture, if we think it's better to have consistency across all the surveys, I could get my head around just leaving it as is. I don't know if anyone else had any other thoughts on the matrix. I don't know if anyone looked at, we did a matrix like this a while ago, and pretty much it was much simpler, but pretty much everything we covered. the exception of security that we had is covered here.
Pat, if I could just jump in for a little bit too. I'm hesitant to leave this the way it is without actually looking at it in a weighted way that we as the PBC feel is more important. Our goal, I think, is to be able to say to the town that we looked at all these options, we looked at all the reports, we looked at everything, and we feel that whatever site it is the site that it should be because we did this. If we have questions about these ratings, I would feel comfortable changing it. It doesn't have to compare to the others. We're making a decision that we need to justify at the end of the day.
Okay.
So Pat, you mentioned possibly lowering the weight of number 8 and increasing the weight of number 10. Was there another one that you had suggested?
11. Be honest, I would zap 11 altogether. That gives you 1 point. You got to redistribute. I'd put a half of that point on item 10. Gotta tell you, I'd probably zap item 8 too. Give me another point. That I would distribute the points to half a point to 3 and half a point to 9. And if we zapped 11, I'd do a half a point to 10. That leaves a half a point still hanging out. And I'd probably put that on item 7, pushing that up to 2.0, because I'm a fiscal discipline guy. So.
Okay.
I don't know if anyone followed that or had any commentary.
I definitely don't agree on zapping 11.
All right.
I think that it seems like there's a lot of these that talk about like future expansion and growth, which doesn't seem clear why that's a priority, but also doesn't seem like something that our committee should have a lot of. Like if we're being told that the building needs to be able to expand, or the site needs to be able to expand, then that's one thing, but otherwise it's hard to say whether this site matters for that, if it's hard, if we're really voting on whether we think that's an important aspect of the program, I guess. But I guess it's like some of these questions speak more to like, what is the objective of the building as opposed to, does the site make an easier project to build a building on?
Yeah.
Which would be more of the priorities of our committee.
So one consideration that I would suggest for expanding the programs is that if there have been some discussions about possibly other things that could go there, but I think the bigger picture is just needs do change over time for a community. That's kind of why we're doing this project now. So anytime you have space to adapt to those needs, that's generally more favorable than if you're constrained to just whatever is meeting those needs to date.
Sorry, if we keep in 11, I'll concede to that. But what do you think about, what does everyone at the table think about the 8, the operational costs for me? It doesn't do much for me. I don't know. I guess it's a little different for the Pleasant Street site.
Yeah, it seems to me that if Pleasant Street is off, we're basically comparing apples to apples, and I think that, I don't know, but I would assume that operational costs will be roughly in the same ballpark, because you're basically, at least from what I saw, you're looking at the same building. Obviously, there are going to be some changes, but it's basically the same building. So I don't know that that's too terribly important for me. For me, what I think is really important, just because I know it's going to be an issue because I live in that neighborhood. Oakland, the parking, the abutters and the parking and the traffic are going to be a big deal. And so both from the standpoint of making the right decision for the project and also selling it to the community at large, I think number 2 and 3, if we're moving points around, need a little bit more emphasis.
Okay.
Pat, in that same vein, I'll chime in on a couple things that both you and Aria pointed out. I think under number 8 for operational costs, again, I think if Pleasant Street, an expansion at Pleasant Street is kind of a non-starter, you're looking at a brand new building, you need a location. And I think consistent with discussions we've had in a different building committee setting, it's going to be a bigger building, so there's more building, and it's going to be more complex systems and more equipment that's going to require more service and maintenance. So I think the operational cost is going to be about the same. And from a sustainability perspective, I think if we're building to stretch code, both buildings are going to end up in about the same place in terms of efficiency and design and use and energy consumption. They're going to be high. So I'm not sure, again, if we're in a position where we're talking about a brand new building at Oakland Road or a brand new building at Simon's Way, how much weight can we really put on a brand new building built to stretch code, and what more from a sustainability perspective are we going to do different at one site versus the other?
Ari?
No, I agree with that. So the one thing I'm noticing in the conversation is that we're all sort of already assuming Pleasant Street is out, which I think is right. That's logical. But if the purpose of this to demonstrate that, or to just compare Simon's and Oakland?
Yeah, I think
if so, maybe we need to change the weighting, like reduce the weighting of operational costs, but then keep it in just so it proves that Pleasant Street drops out. Like,
I mean, our assumption was Pleasant Street, you'd be hard pressed to get it to the same R value as a new building, and it would be older systems, and it wouldn't be as efficient of a building, and that needs to weigh in on your decision. So
one thing we haven't considered with Pleasant Street, though, is demolishing the existing building, starting again, starting fresh. It's a junky building. To me, it has no value. Some people think it has cultural value, historical value. I don't see it personally.
Be gentle, because we may be asking people to support it in the form of a lease or something, so I wouldn't.
Well, I mean, that's much. It seems to me this list here ignores two basic things, two very important things. One is the location relative to the center of population. In real estate, it's location, location, location. Nothing in here gives any weighting to the location of the building. Simmons Way is
possibly 9, but I agree with you.
Simmons Way is the worst location. In terms of, forgetting all the other stuff, putting a building for the seniors on the edge of town, as far away from the center of population as you can get, is the worst scenario. So we're really looking at least worst cases here. None of these sites are ideal. The one that is best in terms of location undoubtedly is Oakland Road. If you take out Pleasant Street, downtown is the best location, but for other reasons, we can't do it.
Yeah. So I think that's covered extensively, like in the feasibility study, et cetera. But I agree, it's not really
not here.
Not covered here.
That is the most important factor in terms of choosing a site for the senior center. It seems to me that I always say, and I've said this to Nancy before, we could rename this one Recalc AIL, Reading Centre for Active Living, almost in Linfield.
Well, I think.
And we have to live with what we've got. I understand, but there's no question in my mind that Simon's Way, I don't know how you pronounce it, is.
We'll decide before the project's built.
The worst site you could imagine. It's right on the edge of town. As far away from the center as you can get.
Yeah.
Other things are good about it, but as I said, in real estate terms, location is everything. The other thing that's missing from here is if you build the senior center somewhere outside of town, outside of center of town, outside of Pleasant Street, then you free up the Pleasant Street site for development or for use by the town. But that's not included here. I think it should be. You know, there's a plus to, I'm arguing against myself here.
Yeah.
There's a plus to putting it out of town if we can't put it in town.
So
It would be best if we could put it in town, but we always say we can't, except if you demolish the existing building, which is what I would do.
Yeah. So there's two parts to that. If you build it, you know, there's a value. If you built it on Simmons Way, there's a value to the existing Pleasant Street Center. But if you built it at Pleasant Street, there's a value to the parcel at Simmons Way
There is.
to the town. So I don't know how you factor those in. I do think that item 9 takes into the location a little bit. And unless we're gonna add something, which I'm perfectly open to, I think the intangible items that you're talking about go to the 20 bonus points.
Yes.
Which, by the way, so we'll talk about the 20 bonus points. Does this just become a results-driven process when you can slap 20 points on the end? And is it like this didn't come out the way I wanted it to, so I'm gonna give this project 20 and the other 2 zeros. So it.
Well, I think there, and we didn't create this, okay?
Yeah, no,
But we did review it and we thought about, you know, whether we should change something or whether we should keep it the same. And I think the reasoning to go with this was because you are going to look at a spectrum of criteria, but everyone has their own perspective. And there's always the possibility that there's some criteria that somebody wants in there that's not really reflected. So by having one sort of fill in the blank, you know, like on our ballots, we don't see the right candidate, we can put it in there. That last section where you can add the points and add your specific comments could be put together. Now, our intention is to, you know, once we move through this process to consolidate the information and present the findings back to you. But I would say that the findings don't have to determine the final ruling. I think it's a tool to help the committee get to the point where they feel comfortable on voting on how best to move forward. So in that light, maybe somebody has a notion when their film going to weight it. And then when we share the results, that information then has an impact on others. And then maybe we look at it a little differently.
Okay. John, are you okay with managing those gaps that you talked about with the 20 point?
No, not really.
Well, let me rephrase that. Will you go along with it? By the way, it took me like a half hour to engage you, but I knew it was coming. I knew I'd get it out of you eventually.
Yeah, well, I couldn't get on the Zoom. The question is whether an analytical approach is really the best one. You know, where we add up points and stuff like that. Personally, I don't think it is, but I don't know what other tool we have.
Yeah. You got to start somewhere. And as Brian mentioned, it's a process we all go through that forces us to think about a lot of different things. And then we tally results, and it's not, you know, finished at that point, kind of like when we did the OPM selection and we scored, but then we sat down and we all talked about it. Why did we score this way, and got each other's opinions? So I would see more often than not when we score, and I think Harry scored the highest, and then we debated a lot of stuff. We moved a few things around, and when we were done, Harry remained the highest recommended OPM candidate. And I suspect the same will happen here, but it wouldn't be hard and fast that what the numbers show, whatever one is the highest. I suspect another meeting where we have a chance to review it and discuss and kick around some thoughts.
But I do think that, you know, there should be one point here, you say on the bonus points, but there should be location you know, the relocation of the site relative to the center of population, senior population or population, generally speaking. Whether you know, whether people will be willing to drive the extra 2 or 3 miles down to Simmons Way relative to downtown, I don't know.
Or able to drive at all is another factor that's missing from this. So I'm sorry, I interrupted you. I didn't mean to.
No, okay,
Go ahead, Ari.
I was gonna say that the extra 3 bonus points, what they're really gonna do is uncover each one of our passion projects, right? And so what, to your point, Pat, we need to be able to explain those to each other, and then maybe we have to rank again or something like that, right? We have, I guess what's your point? We massage the rankings, but I mean, I could think of three categories that are missing. I think everybody else would add categories, and as long as the 20 points is a way that leads to that discussion, I'm fine with it. But if the 20 points is just a way to put your thumb on the scale for the option that you like the best, and we're not going to really be able to convince each other of what those are, then it just hurts us.
Right, right. I agree, and I'm confident that everyone scoring this will score it that way. You know, taking into account the factors that as you go through the process that you don't feel are reflected here, and not necessarily just, as you put it, very, very accurately putting your thumb on the scale. So, and I'm good. I could suggest a couple of minor tweaks to the weightings, and I'll throw those out. If we took the 8 operational costs and 11 sustainability impact on design, and we reduce those from 1.5 points. And then if we added a point to 3 traffic conditions and added, not a point, a half a point, and added a half a point to 10 accommodates other outdoor activities. I felt like that should be weighted higher, but I'm not married to it. If someone wanted to allocate that somewhere else. Such as 9, John, if you thought 9 in close proximity to multiple programs. So I don't know if that's really a location. It's the closest thing to a location.
I think it, to some extent it is, yeah.
So would you rather add a half a point to 9 instead of 10?
Yeah, I do care, yeah, one way or the other.
Does that work for the committee if we make those 2 changes?
You run through what the 2 changes are once.
Yeah, so I'm suggesting we reduce the operational costs weighting from 1 down to 0.5.
So number 8.
Number 8, we reduce number 11, sustainability impact on design from 1 down to 0.5. We increase number 3, traffic conditions by 0.5 from 1 to 1.5. And we increase facilitates multi-generational use. Just that in and of itself leads to location from 1 to 1.5. So little distribution of points.
Could I make, so in thinking about 11 in particular, one step higher just for a second. So these were designed to some extent thinking about community needs and particularly focused on the most active expected users of the location. So 11 actually, I think, played into it in terms of a desire to be as sustainable as possible in terms of what's going on. And frankly, that led to some distinctions between the sites. So you can call, sustainability not touching a building, but I think that as one person who filled the forms out, I looked at, can we accomplish sustainability goals at this site? Yes or no? And one of them, I think, lends itself to kind of all options, potentially. Another probably has some real issues with geothermal and doing additional deep borings and other things, possibly. That's how it was interpreted. And the third one was, given where it is in an existing building, less likely to have it. There really is not an option, and we certainly dealt with it as not an option that you can just take down Pleasant Street. The historical aspects of it and a number of other reasons that's not an option on the table as we viewed it. So that's, to get the location by taking down the building, we viewed as that's a non-starter, not a possibility. And in discussions with the Historic Commission and others, even adding to it, there were certain aspects that were very contentious and others that were less contentious. So maybe that's kind of thinking about it. I think moving things around is fine. I just would suggest maybe, sustainability, I guess it's not a zero, so that's good. But I think it actually is something that folks have talked about. And I think in thinking about the community as a whole, I think it's a pretty important aspect also.
Yeah, I don't disagree that sustainability is important. I mean, without really getting into it, like my off the cuff would be to rank the Pleasant Street Center the highest because of the value of reusing an existing building and making less concrete that takes a lot of energy and puts a lot of CO2 into the air. So that would actually, the reverse of kind of how you put it is how I would look at that. And I don't think I'm the only one on the committee that would consider that highly. But I mean, I'm fine leaving that at 1 and trying to find another half point somewhere else or not adding a half point maybe to 9. But I thought adding a half point to 9 gave John a little bit of flexibility on the location, which made a lot of sense to me.
So I'm fine with it all. I'm just making an argument that I think sustainability is not unimportant and there were 2 different swaths on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the problem now, sustainability. There are 2 aspects of it,
Yeah.
There's, it's the embodied carbon versus the future carbon.
Right.
Argument.
Well, I think the question that comes up is, would the Pleasant Street Center be reused by either the town or by an outside group that would keep the building? It's hard to imagine that, from my perspective, being demolished. It is listed on the historical register. It's had a prominent spot in the town for many years. So are there needs for other groups? Are there other city uses that anyone's aware of that might have interest in occupying that space?
It's a wonderful swing space for the time when other downtown public buildings are renovated, like this building. Just you can move departments over there while they're doing things here. So it's a very good asset in that regard. I would rather tear it down.
I can add something too. So I think that we are going to be in a different facility. That facility is now available. And the select board at its next meeting is going to have a discussion on how it would like to approach gathering input for potential uses of it. That could range from swing space to leasing space to, we received an unsolicited, I don't know what the right word is, unsolicited, not an offer, an unsolicited proposal, thank you, to kind of leave the core building and add some residential to it. But it needs to be considered so that the community understands that, hey, if you've opened up a space, what are your thoughts on doing something? And I think what would be unacceptable would be to say, yeah, I haven't really thought about it yet. I think it's time. So the select board's taking that up.
Okay. All right, I think we're good if we make those changes. I don't think we need to vote on this. I think we just make the adjustment and send it out to the committee.
Those adjustments that we mentioned before?
Those 4.
Yeah. Okay.
I got it.
You got them? All right. Thank you for indulging me. And as I go through all that, I think you guys have come up to speed on this ridiculously fast. I think you're doing a fantastic job. I think all the work that has been done on this has been incredible by all parties. Very thorough. There's a ton of information. And going through the process of questioning some things, I don't want anyone to take the wrong ways. If we just trying to get the building committee thinking about, what we should be thinking about, which might be a little different than anything else. So thank you.
To that, we took the opportunity to review, as I mentioned the fact when I started, I chaired my own the building committee for 15 years in my town. I always had a charter. What was our charter?
Yeah.
So I was trying to read your charter to see how you related to this. And it's great that it's sort of wide open. So it gives you the freedom to be able to do this. So I just saying, I couldn't find a way to nail this down as what you all been slated to do. And I think that's great because it opens up discussion even better. So this is, we're thrilled.
Excellent. Thank you. So I think we're good there. Moving on to a review of the preliminary schedule. Ryan, if you want to walk us through that a little bit.
We can go on to the slide. So the schedule was in your packet. So the first thing we did is just put together a formal schedule that documented where we are to date and all the different aspects of the project that have been completed, as well as the ones that are on the road. So this schedule is going to be a working tool. It's important to understand that. It helps us to understand the timelines associated with certain tasks in the future as we look to make decisions and develop plans and how we move forward, and also helps us understand which key factors right now need to be addressed in order to open the gates to move on down the road. The other aspect of the schedule that was included was we put in the schedule information from the Killam project. In our conversations with the town, we understand that both of these projects are happening concurrently. And we felt it was important to understand when the town is going to need to respond to these projects individually. So looking at the Killam project schedule, if you can go to the next. Up, down the other direction. Thank you. So we can see that what they have outlined, and
You had to go. You had somewhere else.
They're having a meeting on the project.
Okay. So you can see that the schematic design for both projects is aimed to finish up right around the same time. And with the MSBA projects, the MSBA usually does its review, and then it comes back to the town to say, are you willing to support this project, so that we can engage on an agreement to provide grant funding for your school and you can move forward. So we'd be looking at a very similar time frame for this project. So I don't think it's anything we need to dive in too much at this point, but as we start bringing up communications with the town, that's something that needs to be considered. How are we going to get our message across about this project, and how is the school getting their message across? If you go down to the next slide. So right now, the key task ahead of us is to get through this site selection process. That one item is holding up the gate really to open up and move ahead with the design. Along with that, we'll have communications that need to be done to update the community on the various stages throughout the design. We'll need some public forums and all those things. But the first task is really to get through the site selection process. So prior to this meeting, I didn't know where we would stand in terms of how people felt about the work that was done so far, how people felt about the selection process. So now that we've discussed some of that, I think it would be good to make a determination about how much time is needed to be able to complete the individual evaluations, and when we should gather together to review that data and move forward with the selection process. So is there any thought from the committee about how much time would be necessary to dig into the materials and to bring their feedback to the committee through this selection tool that we have?
Anyone have any thoughts?
In terms of materials, do you mean this report, or is there more? There's obviously all the information that you went through to make this great summary. Should we review all of that as well, or should we?
Yes, I would suggest the feasibility study as well, because that goes into more detail.
Yeah.
We looked through all that, and I mean, it's not overwhelming.
And we have that.
We always thought that you would, when you talk about weighting, you give more weight to Joel's report than our summary in doing your evaluation. That's how we approached it. The reason is we summarized it so we could get up to speed with it, but we summarized it to get you to this discussion.
Right.
But I think a review of that report, the work that Joel's team did is, I think that's more important than whether or not you think ours is more comprehensive.
And I would also actually add the other reports that were referenced, because there was a significant amount of work done even leading up to the feasibility study that involved gathering input from the community about what's important relative to needs for the seniors, relative to the facilities. And even to your point, John, about the site selection, we talked about that a little earlier. That was also a survey question, and people responded about how they felt. So I think taking all of that into consideration is important. I wouldn't leave any of it out.
There's a lot of information out there, and a lot of it was sent back out this week. Jenna, thank you for sending that to the committee. There was an email, I think it was from Joel, with a link to sort of the raw data.
Right.
That we could probably send around again, just in case anyone didn't download that. And but there's a lot of information. You have all the information. I think we all have all the information that's been distributed. So I don't know if anyone has any thoughts again on a timeline. I mean, for me, it's less about the amount of time I need and more about, finding a few hours of quiet time, which I know I can do in the next couple of weeks. So,
Pat, have we set another meeting date so that we can get together to go over all of this, or what's the next steps? If we do our tabulation and get it to you so that you can then forward it on, what's the timeline for the PBC committee meeting?
I'd say the two go hand in hand. That's like part 2 of the question. And we can focus on what's available coming up for meetings. Town meeting is coming up. Thanksgiving's coming up. So we can gear it. I mean, the reality is no one here needs multiple weeks to actually do the work. Everyone needs the opportunity to sit down and sort of dive into it. And it might be better to just set a meeting date that would force you to do it. Because we could set this meeting date for April, which would mean that on March 31st, I will look at the information.
You got
Or
it.
we can
I
set
think
them, or we could set it the next Monday, which means I would do it this weekend.
that's right. That's what I'm saying. I think a
right.
deadline is always important.
Okay, so, sort of same question, thoughts on a next meeting. Does anyone know? I know there's a bunch of people in this room that can tell me when town meeting is.
18th.
Town meeting's the 18th?
No.
Our meeting starts the 12th.
18th, 14th,
And then
and 12th. Sorry, because the 11th is Veterans Day.
21st.
The 12th is the first one, the 14th, and then the 18th.
But 18th was looking at like a good day for us too.
think it'll go 3 days in the meeting.
Then be taking committees on it, could be past Thanksgiving.
I think I'll go Wednesday the 20th.
There's a Killam school meeting, and that doesn't matter. That it's-
Yeah.
Is the 13th too tight?
Next Wednesday.
I love 13th.
Next Wednesday.
We actually have a council on aging meeting set up for the 13th, but we could move it because I think this is really important. So we could move it.
On the 13th, I could do the 13th. I have a board meeting at 6 o'clock. I could do it at 7. That would be a Zoom meeting and they don't last very long.
Any chance it could be 7:30? I have a 7 o'clock call.
I'm fine with 7:30 on the 13th.
I'm open.
And that will put my calendar. Does that mean that pretty much puts us at this weekend? Review.
I wouldn't be able to do that, but I'm not the only one.
What was that?
I wouldn't be able to make that meeting on the 13th.
Would you be able to, do you think you'd be able to get through the score sheet No.
I'm going on vacation in 2 days. I land at 7:30 on the 13th, so.
What's the problem?
Not it, but I don't want my circumstance to be the final factor, so.
Yeah, it's important. So just what I mentioned in the schedule, you know, we have a lot of work that needs to be done on the design end. And we want to take as much time as we need to do it right. But we also want to be able to get Joel's team going in order to be able to meet those dates that we have set for the spring.
Yeah. I would be okay with the setting up a meeting for Wednesday, the 13th at 7:30. Apologize, Ari.
I'll do my best.
It's not it's far from a reflection on not wanting your input,
no.
because we do. And if you look at stuff and wanted to just jot down some thoughts too.
What to do on the plane.
And then for the site evaluations, I know with the Council on Aging and Recalc, everyone sent their results to town staff because of open meeting law. So if you want to send it to myself and Jane, that might be great. And then we can populate them all into one document and then send them all to Joel like we did the last time, and Brian and Chuck.
That would be perfect. And I'd say, I don't know, is it okay if everyone gets to you Tuesday night, just pull it together Wednesday?
Well, the data would have to be formulated by the.
Well, if it's just those score sheets, the data goes pretty quick.
Yeah.
Joel did it, so. Yeah.
That's all Joel.
To be honest, if you want to get us the data sheets, we will, the three of us can have a quick conversation, but I don't think that's a big reach.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's not a heavy.
Yeah, we'll need a little time to look it over before the meeting, just so we understand where the feedback is. But the meeting is not till 7:30, so if we got it that day, if you had everything ready the day before or something, that should be fine.
It's either telling us end of day Monday or end of day Tuesday.
Either way.
I don't know that it matters much to us either, but
we could get.
I would shoot for end of day Monday, having all the data to the city or to the town.
Yeah.
All right, you guys all good with that?
At the end of the day, Monday, we'll expect the Wednesday, we'll chase them on Tuesday.
Yeah, that'll give you the chase day. I forgot about that. That is perfect.
And give Brian and I on Wednesday morning or Tuesday, I think, to coming in to get things wrapped up.
Yeah.
And share it, and then off we go.
Okay.
Good. Excellent.
Pat, are you thinking at that meeting would be a discussion and potentially a vote as well, or what's your?
My hopes would be we would come with a compiled score sheet, discussion and vote. And we would vote on recommending a site, would be my hopes. Okay. There's a lot to do in a short amount of time, but I have confidence in the team.
If that's all okay, what I'd like to do is get onto the select board agenda for the 19th of November.
Yeah.
Because of town meeting, the meetings aren't the usual every 2-week cadence.
Okay.
So Matt, if I can enlist your support with that.
Anything else on schedule? We kind of veered off a little there.
No, I think we just need to focus on this next step right now.
Yep.
And get through that, and then.
Refining the schedule every step.
Yeah, we have the framework in place and we'll be updating it.
Yeah.
On a regular basis.
Yeah.
Can I ask one other question with the schedule? After this, the intent is to jump right into ST.
Right.
Are we missing the concept design phase, or is this? I wonder, I want to make sure that we can address, like, if we jump right into designing a building without agreeing first on what kind of building we're designing. Are we missing opportunities, like, for example, to talk about whether it should be built out of steel and concrete, or if there's a mass timber hybrid approach, like some of these bigger picture questions. I just want to make sure we have opportunity to discuss and answer those in the process of the design, as opposed to jumping right into, putting rectangles together and fitting steel and glass around it.
I think we looked at it, I won't speak for Joel or for anybody else, but we looked at it as what Recalc, remember this, a C and a not a C.
Yes.
Recalc was the concept phase. That's how we approached it.
Okay.
And how we understood it. And if I'm wrong, I'd be glad to be wrong, but that's how we approached it. So that from the concept phase, we move into schematics, which is when Joel can correct me, we can have those discussions.
Okay.
The analysis on steel or concrete versus mass timber is way beyond concept design for us. I mean, I can send you what we did for Newton. It's voluminous and takes, you sort of have to have a good design to start and doing the analysis with, and the carbon analysis and the embodied.
That's what we
That's
look at.
that.
I would be interested in that, by the way. I grew up the street from that building, so.
That ended up being a fully 99% wood building.
Okay, so that's all, that's the answer to my question. There's time to discuss that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what we approached it.
And I think that brings us to the next thing that was on our agenda, which was to talk about some of the working groups potentially that we'll need to have. So I think you're kind of leading into that, your interest in being very involved in that schematic design phase and weighing in on a lot of these questions. So, you know, we need to discuss as a group on what types of working groups would be appropriate. You know, how many individuals do we anticipate having on those groups? And start to think about that so that when we are ready to get started, we can move forward.
Yeah, maybe we can start with just open discussion on what subcommittees we think we need. First two that come to my mind are a communication subcommittee and a sustainability subcommittee.
You're reading my sheet.
It was an email.
And I would add design to that.
Okay, I like that.
The design could be integrated into the sustainability because.
Yeah.
Sustainability is one component. But when we talk about, you know, we have a, multi-purpose room, like what are we gonna put in there for flooring?
Yeah.
You know, what are the options? There is a sustainability component of that, but, you know, two separate things on the design side of things. And that's a very broad term. Design, but it's kind of.
I like having sustainability separate from design. I think.
I agree.
You know, you can dig deeper into sustainability.
Can you think of any others, Joel, that you would prefer to have?
Well, the design is, I mean, it depends on how it's, I mean, lots of times the design is done with the COA or a group from the senior center, not necessarily the building. I don't know how you want to frame that. We oftentimes make a presentation to the building committee, but the selections are done by the works both ways.
I think the architect should design the building.
100%.
Try to be the architect. You know, we are there to give comments, feedback, suggestions, but we should not try to take the lead in determining these things. It's the architects knows a lot more about it than we do.
There's a ulterior motive at times that are involving the COA and the other seniors in some of the selections and materials can generate some excitement. Because ultimately we want people to go to town meeting and say, this project makes a lot of sense. We really understand the intergenerational aspect. We love the way it looks. We buy into the finishes. That's all important to get to. And we don't get to that unless we're reaching out to the users and have that groundswell of support at town meeting.
I agree 100%, John.
Yeah.
BH+A is designing this building.
You have to reach out to us. We are not trying to give you direction.
But
that never works. You know, having been in this business for 60 years.
But I would expect, you know, feedback from Nancy about, you know, size of rooms, use of rooms, some finishes, some things like that. If I'm on that committee, I'm going to be asking questions about and giving input on constructability of materials and things like that. Cost might come up in a question for me. Who knows? But we're all gonna bring, our skill set and ask questions. But BH will say is designing the building.
Yes.
No question about it.
I will warn you that cost always comes up in our review. Just so you know.
I mean, design can be broken down into multiple subcategories, but I don't think that's necessary. Nancy, were your thoughts on, is that good 3 categories? Those 3 subcommittees? I know you had some thoughts on this.
Yeah, no, I think those are good. I see the sustainability as sort of the driver for the, particularly if it's a wood frame timber building, but that input I think is very critical for the overarching aspect of this building. And then Nancy Zimlak with and maybe some of the Council on Aging or there's another group out there, right, that is doing raising funds for furnishings, having some feedback on what types of furnishings and level of detail would be great for a separate committee. And then communications, how are we going to get this out to the public? That's huge. And I'm more worried about who does that and how that gets done quickly and in concert with the Killam School Building Committee.
So I think we're good with the 3 committees, 3 subcommittees. We're an hour and a half into this meeting. I don't know if it makes sense to let people stew on that until the next meeting and give some thought to who wants to be on what subcommittee. We can also give some thought to size, and it doesn't need to be the people in this room. Nancy, I know there's probably a lot of people at Council on Aging. There might be some people that that will have a lot of opinions and some skill sets some skill sets we can tap into. And I would think it would be each of these subcommittees may or may not be, but they could have someone from the PBC, someone from Council on Aging, and town staff all on that committee. And we want to be careful about size. We don't want them to be so big that they're unwieldy and it's difficult. But if there's work to do, more hands the better.
So maybe for the next meeting, people can come back with some recommendations about who they think would be good for those various groups and maybe also number. And I agree, it's good to have not too many people. Sometimes what I've seen is when they're too large, everyone quiets down and you really don't get a lot of feedback.
Yeah.
Or maybe there's one person that dominates,
Yeah. Just a thought to the extent that it follows what I think you guys were just saying, where there's kind of one PBC member plus a variety of others. That's very clean from an open meeting law standpoint, extremely.
Right.
Yeah.
When you start adding multiple people, it's at best murky and maybe it's not even murky, it's trouble.
Yeah, no, we would, that would be a consideration and not to, be transparent, but just to avoid the quorum and the notifying. We'd stay away from a quorum in any of these subcommittees. And I don't think we'd be, but I don't think I don't think there's 3 or 4 of us that are gonna want to be on the same subcommittee. I don't think that would overwhelm the committee. That wouldn't be a good diverse group if we had 4 PBC members on the sustainability committee. That wouldn't make sense.
one of the benefits also is it helps to expedite the design process, providing greater flexibility with scheduling meetings when they're needed.
Yeah.
That the architect has the information they need to move forward.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, just as a small, yes, I'm very formal, as a small consideration of the term subcommittee, we would prefer working group.
Yes.
Working group.
I made that note too.
That is just that's an open meeting law thing, so. Right?
Yeah, that's what we do in Killam, and they're not. public
Okay.
meetings.
It's for the purpose of the minutes and the understanding of so that we're not doing any kind of meeting or stuff, and it allows the group to be able to pivot, with schedules. It's already looking at November, trying to schedule meetings. It's really hard to spring right into the holidays, so.
Okay.
Not having to worry about that is great.
Okay. So I think we're in agreement in 3 working groups.
Yeah, I love it when you.
We don't have anybody here tonight representing the the staff of the senior center. Is that,
Chris was.
Oh, yeah, Chris is here.
We did.
Yeah, that's Jane.
Donna.
but they should be involved in the working groups.
Yes.
Yeah.
The staff will drag people. Yeah, but we got. But they'll come, they're not sticking, no, we have a lot of support that we will bring to the table.
Because I know, you have director and you have nurses and stuff, people like that. Somehow they have to be involved because I think they are the key people.
Yes,
Yes, absolutely.
agreed. The working groups do not consist solely of people that are in this.
Right,
room
that's
on
what-
Zoom. 100%, I agree.
Give you a lot of staff support.
Excellent.
So we'll bring back recommendations for the next meeting to discuss. Yep.
In between that time, if anyone, specifically wants to be part of a specific committee, reach out to,
Itself or the chair.
yeah, you can reach out to myself or Jane. Just don't copy anyone else.
Yeah, I wouldn't reach out to you.
Yeah.
It's the open meeting law again.
Yeah, that's fine. Anyone that has ideas on who should be on a committee, maybe send something to Jenna and Jane.
Not to be a stickler, but we've
Totally.
been into this.
Yeah.
Totally fine.
Pat, since Mark and I have already filled out the form, should we, even though we're temporary BBC
Yeah.
people, should we fill it out or not?
I'd like to answer that. So we have to.
Yeah.
First of all, the weightings are different.
Okay.
It means something different already. But second of all, as far as this project is concerned, we are permanent building committee members, not temporary anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just check.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, I was thinking the same thing when I was driving here, but yeah, I think, absolutely, I think you should all fill it out,
okay.
as well as all the associate members. When we eventually vote, the voting members will vote. Okay.
Good.
Anything else on the working groups?
No. There was one thing that was not on the agenda for this meeting, but I wanted to bring a heads up for the next meeting is that we will need to discuss invoice approvals just as a matter of administration.
We can talk to Jeff about that.
All right, so you jumped right into future meeting agenda items.
Invoices.
You guys can figure that out, and if we need to put it on the agenda, anything on the agenda next
Yeah,
meeting, let me know.
we need to put it on the agenda for the next meeting for
Okay.
sure. To determine if there's a threshold that this committee wants to allow the manager to approve. And then bring back that invoice. We do something similar on the phone.
Okay.
So it's not, right now, the invoices are from BHA and Erie. But, having a standing process is useful for
Yeah.
discussion, so that would be the item for the agenda.
Okay.
In the meantime, if you already have an invoice,
We do not.
present so soon.
No.
Just send it to us.
The paperwork, the amount it would cost me to have somebody prepare invoice for 2 days just doesn't make sense. You'll get it at the end of the month.
And do we need to approve the minutes, last month's minutes?
Yeah, we're getting there. We're not there yet.
I'm sorry.
Jumping ahead. Does anyone else have any other future meeting agenda items related to the Center for Active Living project? Pick that off. The approval of the minutes, I'm a little fuzzy on if that's part of my subset for Center for Active Living or PBC, but I roll it under the general PBC. So if I get a motion, if everyone's reviewed the meeting minutes, and if anyone has, unless anyone has comments, I get a motion to accept those.
Member of the standing committee.
I want it from anyone.
Motion to approve the minutes of. Sorry, September 16, 2024 as written.
Seconded. Any other discussion?
The second was in here.
No, second from Chris. Okay, Greg,
Yes.
John Coot,
Yes.
Kirk McCormick,
Yes.
Nancy Toomey,
Yes.
Nancy Zimlak,
Yes.
Mark Doxer,
Yes.
and Pat Tompkins, yes. Got everyone, right? Okay. Motion passes. Any future meeting items related to the PBC? You good, right, Joe? All right. So wrap, I'll accept, entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move. Did somebody second it?
I'll second.
Second. Greg,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Kirk,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Nancy Z,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Pat, yes. Motion passes there. Thank you all. Thank you all for enduring that.